I was 21 the night I met Alex, and I was convinced my real life was finally beginning. Atlanta felt like a different planet compared to my father's farm in Alabama. The air inside the club was thick with perfume, sweat, and bass that rattled in my ribs. Neon lights painted everyone in flashing pinks and blues. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the city girl version of me, the one who studies architecture, drinks cocktails, and never smells like cows. I was standing near the bar, turning my straw in a watered-down drink, when I felt someone step up beside me. "Is this seat taken?" a deep voice asked. I turned, and there he was. Tall, clean-cut, in a crisp white shirt that actually looked pressed, not pulled from a pile. Dark hair, warm eyes, that easy smile city men have in movies. Everything about him screamed, not a farm boy. "No," I managed, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. He didn't lean too close, didn't make some disgusting joke, didn't look me up and down like I was for sale. He just sat, signaled the bartender, and said, "Whatever she's having, only make it drinkable this time." I laughed. It felt good to laugh, like I was the heroine of something for once. "I'm Alex," he said, holding out his hand like a gentleman. "You look like you don't belong here." "I'm Tiffany," I answered. "And why would you say that?" "Because you're watching everyone like you're studying a building," he said. "Not like you're just here to dance." That hit me right in the center of my secret dream. I'd told nobody at home that I wanted to study architecture. To them, college was a waste of money, and buildings were just things you lived in, not something you designed. "How do you know that?" I asked. He shrugged. "I work with numbers and risk all day. I'm good at observing things." "A banker," he added when I raised a brow. "Boring, I know." It didn't feel boring. Over the next weeks, Alex didn't just charm me. He made me feel seen. He took me to coffee shops I'd never heard of, asked about my sketches, listened when I talked about buildings and bridges like they were people. He opened doors, paid for dinners without making it weird, walked me to my small rented room like it was the most natural thing in the world. When we first slept together, it felt like love. I was naive and romantic enough to believe that was still how it worked. You meet someone kind, you fall, you build a life. Simple. A few months later, the pregnancy test turned positive. I sat on the edge of my bathtub, my hands shaking, the plastic stick on my knees. Part of me was terrified. Another part imagined a little apartment with a crib by the window, me studying at night while a baby slept, Alex's arms around us both. When I told him, he went quiet. Too quiet. His jaw worked, his eyes moved like he was doing mental math. Then he said very slowly, "Okay, if it's happening, I'll take responsibility. We'll figure it out." I held on to that sentence like a lifeline. But halfway through my pregnancy, responsibility turned into a weight he didn't want. We were in his car when it happened, parked outside my building. My belly was finally big enough that strangers smiled at me in grocery stores. I thought we were going to talk about where we'd live, maybe even names. Instead, Alex stared out the windshield and said, "Tiffany, I can't do this." Something cold slid down my spine. "Can't do what?" "This." His hand made a vague circle in the air, like I was just smoke he could wave away. "The baby, the family thing. I'm 25. I'm about to get promoted. I'm finally moving up. A kid right now would ruin everything." I felt like he'd opened the door and pushed me out onto the street. "You said you'd take responsibility," I whispered. "I was trying to do the right thing," he said quickly. "But I've thought about it, and I'm not ready to be a father. I want a happy, carefree life while I'm still young. I can't be tied down, not like this." I turned my face to the window so he wouldn't see the tears. In that moment, something in me hardened. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't call him names. "Okay," I said finally, voice flat. "Get me home." He drove me back in silence. When I got out, he didn't follow. The car door shut, the engine started, and Alex Krasowski drove away from me and our child like it was just another turn in the road. I never called him again. Rent, prenatal vitamins, doctor visits. I did the math alone, late at night, staring at my empty wallet. My city dreams shrank with every calculation. Atlanta apartments didn't care about heartbreak. Bills wouldn't pay themselves with tears. A week later, I packed my clothes into 2 suitcases, folded my half-finished architecture sketches, and bought a bus ticket back to Alabama. As the city lights disappeared behind me, I rested a hand on my belly. "It's just for a year or 2, I whispered to the baby. "Until you're bigger. Then we'll come back. Then I'll be the woman I wanted to be." I believed it with all my heart. I had no idea how long the farm, and the world, would ask me to stay. The bus dropped me at the edge of the highway, and the rest of the way I walked. Red dirt clung to my sneakers, dust rising with every step. The farmhouse looked exactly like it had when I was a kid. White paint peeling, porch sagging a little on the right. Bobby Frazier's truck parked in the same spot like it had grown roots. My father stepped out onto the porch when he heard the gravel crunch. He wiped his hands on a rag, saw the suitcases, then my belly. The look on his face hurt more than anything Alex had ever said. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "You come back like this?" "Hi, Daddy," I said, breathless from the walk, one hand on my lower back. Don't you hi, Daddy me?" His jaw clenched, eyes flicking to my stomach like it was a crime. "You show up here, belly full, no husband, no ring. You know what the church ladies'll say, your mama would—" He stopped, nostrils flaring. "This is a shame, Tiffany. A shame." I swallowed hard. I don't have anywhere else to go. He stared at me a long second, then nodded once, sharp. "You can stay, but I'm not feeding you for free. You made this bed, you lay in it. You'll work. Same as me." "If you're big enough to sleep with a man, you're big enough to work," I heard beneath his words, even if he didn't say it out loud. My old room still smelled faintly like my mother's cheap floral perfume and dust. Her quilt was folded at the end of the bed. The photo of her and Daddy at some long-ago church picnic still sat on the dresser. I placed my suitcases against the wall, looked at my reflection, older, rounder, tired, and whispered to the ceiling, "I'm sorry, Mama. I messed up." Life on the farm didn't care that I was pregnant. I was up before sunrise, pulling on rubber boots, shrugging into an old flannel shirt that barely buttoned over my stomach. I fed the horses, hauled buckets of water to the cows, scattered feed for the hens. My back screamed, my ankles swelled, my hands cracked from soap and cold water. Whenever I slowed down, Daddy's voice cut through the air. "Baby out of wedlock and you think you can lie in bed all day?" He snapped once when he caught me sitting on an overturned crate, catching my breath. "Get up. World doesn't stop because you made bad choices." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. I'd chosen Alex. I'd chosen the city. Now I was choosing this baby. If this was the price, I would pay it. I worked like that until the very last day. That morning the air was heavy and humid, the sky low and gray. I took the metal can of cereal out to the hen house, the scratch rattling inside. The hens clucked and swarmed around my boots as I bent forward, my belly pressing against my thighs. Halfway through pouring, I felt something warm rush down my legs. For a heartbeat, I thought I just peed myself. Then another cramp hit, deeper, sharper, and I had to grab the side of the coop to stay upright. "Oh, God," I whispered. "Oh, God, it's time." I dropped the can. It clanged against the packed dirt, spilling cereal everywhere. The hens went crazy, pecking and flapping, a storm of feathers around my feet. Holding my belly with both hands, I shuffled back toward the house, each step sending pain up my spine. By the time I pushed the door open, my breaths were coming in short, panicked bursts. "Daddy," I gasped. "My water broke. I need—" He turned from the kitchen sink, saw the mud on my boots, the cereal dust on my jeans, and through the window, the hens tearing into the overturned can. "For crying out loud, Tiffany!" he exploded. "You just left the feed there? That's money! Those stupid birds will eat a week's worth in 10 minutes. Can't you do one thing right?" I gripped the door frame, another contraction twisting through me so hard I saw white. "I'm in labor," I said through my teeth. "Right now." He froze. For a moment, the anger slipped from his face and something like fear flickered there instead. His eyes dropped to the puddle forming on the floor beneath me, then back to my face gone pale. He didn't apologize. Bobby Fraser wasn't built for apologies, but he moved fast, grabbing a towel, cursing under his breath, shouting, "Sit down before you fall," as he reached for the phone. By the time he hung up with the dispatcher, and we heard the distant wail of an ambulance siren somewhere beyond the fields, he stood at the window, fists tight at his sides, watching the hens eat. "He's using her," he'd say years later, eyes on that same window. But right then, all I could think was that a new life was coming, and whether my father was ashamed or not, whether the hens ate every last grain, there was no going back. They put my daughter in my arms, and the whole world shrank to the weight of 7.5 pounds. She was red-faced and furious, screaming like she'd already decided life was unacceptable. I laughed and sobbed at the same time, touching the tiny fist that somehow belonged to me. "Do you have a name?" the nurse asked gently. I did. I'd carried it with me since the second line showed up on that test. "Audrey," I whispered. "Her name is Audrey." My mother's name. The one person who had ever made this house feel like a home. When Daddy came into the hospital room, he tried to stand at the door like he didn't care. His hat was clutched in both hands, his Sunday shirt too stiff on his shoulders. His eyes went first to me, pale, exhausted, hair a mess, then to the bundle in my arms. "This her?" he asked, as if there might be another newborn hidden somewhere. "This is Audrey," I said softly. "Like Mama." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or just a memory he'd spent years refusing to touch. He cleared his throat. "Audrey's too big a name for a little thing like that," he muttered, stepping closer despite himself. "I'll call her Bree." He held out his hands, awkward and unsure, like someone asking to borrow a tool he'd never used before. When I laid her in his arms, his whole body changed. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. He stared down at her like she'd hung the moon herself. From that day on, he was different. Not with me. Not really. He still barked when I forgot to close a gate, still grumbled about consequences and choices. But with Bree, he was soft in ways I'd never seen. He built her a little wooden swing and hung it from the oak tree. He brought home bright plastic toys from the dollar store, pretending the cashier had pushed them on him. When she got old enough to toddle after him in the yard, he'd scoop her up with a mock scowl. "You won't be like your mom," he'd say, half smiling, half serious, bouncing her on his hip. "You'll have your head on straight, won't you, Bree?" Then he'd work even harder. Longer days in the fields, extra repairs for neighbors, anything that meant a little more money for her future. For her, not for me. I learned to be okay with that. My days blurred into a rhythm of diapers and dawn chores. I breastfed Bree on overturned buckets in the barn, weeded the garden with her asleep in a carrier on my chest, learned to cook one-handed with her on my hip. My hands always smelled like earth, milk, and hay. At night, when the house was finally quiet and Bree was snoring softly in her crib, I'd take out my phone, the one city luxury I'd fought to keep. Sometimes I'd open Alex's profile. There he was, in perfectly lit photos, standing in a sleek loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of downtown Atlanta, wearing tailored suits, holding heavy glasses of whiskey, laughing at rooftop bars, captions about grind, hustle, rising in finance. Sometimes a girl tucked under his arm, brunette, blonde, laughing with her head thrown back. He looked happy, carefree, exactly like he'd said he wanted. I never liked to post, never commented. My thumb would hover over the message button for a second, then I'd lock the screen and put the phone face down. We didn't speak. We lived in two different worlds now. One of office glass and city light, one of red dirt and baby cries in the dark. Between us stood a little girl named after my mother, who had no idea yet how much weight her name and her life would have to carry. By the time Audrey turned 3, it was clear the farm was too small for her mind. She talked early, asked questions nobody could answer fast enough, counted things before I even thought of it. "Mama, why is the sky big here and small in town?" she'd ask on the way to church. "Mama, why is Granddaddy's truck louder than Pastor's car?" Her world was numbers, words, patterns. One evening, sitting on the back steps while Bree drew crooked circles in the dust with a stick, I said it out loud. "Daddy, I need to take her back to the city." Bobby sat beside me, boots planted, arms crossed. "What's wrong with the schools here?" he grunted. "Nothing," I said carefully. "But she's different. Her teachers at Sunday school already said she's ahead. I want her to have more. Languages, good teachers, opportunities." He spat into the dirt, thinking. "City's where you got knocked up," he said finally. "City's where that boy left you." "I know." I stared at Audrey, who was now explaining something very serious to the dog. "But it's also where the better schools are." He didn't answer that night, but a week later, he slid an envelope across the kitchen table. "Sold the old tractor," he muttered. "There's not much, but it'll get you started. You want to waste your life chasing buildings again, that's your business. Just don't you dare waste hers. Every penny goes to Bree. Not to makeup, not to shoes. You lost your life already. Give her a better one." It stung, but I nodded. "I will, I promise." We found a tiny apartment in Atlanta, a one-bedroom walk-up that smelled faintly like cigarettes and old carpet, with a view of a parking lot and a sliver of sky. To me, it looked like possibility. I got a job as a receptionist at a small medical clinic, answering phones, scheduling appointments, smiling at people who rarely smiled back. It wasn't architecture, but it was steady, and it paid most of the bills. Audrey started kindergarten just after her 4th birthday. I still remember her first day. Backpack too big, braids crooked because I couldn't get them even, eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. 2 weeks later, her teacher asked me to stay after class. "Miss Fraser," she said, folding her hands on the tiny table, "Audrey is exceptional. She reads at least at a 2nd grade level. Her math skills are advanced. She's curious. She remembers everything. Have you considered enrichment programs? Maybe testing?" I looked down at my worn-out shoes and the second-hand blouse I'd ironed 3 times. "I haven't considered anything," I admitted. "I'm just trying to keep the lights on." The teacher smiled kindly. "Then let us help. It would be a shame not to grow what she's already got." That night, I called Daddy. "She's smart, huh?" he said, and I could hear the pride he was trying to hide. "Of course she is. She's my blood." "Mine too," I said softly, but I smiled into the dark. He reminded me again not to spend a penny on myself. I promised again that I wouldn't. If I had to live on instant noodles and thrift store clothes for the rest of my life, I would. As long as Audrey got more than I ever did, it would be worth it. By the time Audrey turned 9, our lives revolved around bus schedules, homework, and a calendar full of competitions and extra classes. I'd thought gifted meant a couple of advanced worksheets and a nice comment from a teacher. I was wrong. At 9, Audrey spoke English, Spanish, French, and German like it was nothing. She was learning Russian, Italian, and Mandarin, for fun, as she put it, scribbling strange alphabets on sticky notes and taping them around our small apartment. Whole sentences in 3 languages would fall out of her mouth over breakfast while I was still trying to wake up with cheap instant coffee. In math, she didn't just get good grades, she crushed everyone. She won local contests, then state-level competitions. Her name started popping up in small articles. "Local Girl 9 sets new record in state math challenge." They used words like prodigy and genius. I'd buy every paper, circle her name, and send 1 copy down to Alabama. Daddy would call that night, voice rough with pride he refused to name. "Of course she's a genius," he'd say. "She's my blood." "What? You think she got that brain of yours from those nightclub lights?" I'd laugh, picturing the man who never finished high school because he was too busy smoking behind the bleachers and working odd jobs. "Sure, Daddy," I'd say. "Pure Fraser genius." Some nights, when Audrey was asleep and the apartment was finally quiet, I'd stand in her doorway and just watch her breathe. This little girl, who'd once fit in my arms at the hospital, was now out there solving equations I didn't even understand. And she was mine. All mine. I was 31, but sometimes I felt much older. My life was a loop: work at the clinic, cook cheap but filling meals, help with homework where I could, Google everything I didn't understand, fill out scholarship forms, chase opportunities. Dating wasn't just on the back burner, it wasn't even in the kitchen. That changed the day we were invited to a ceremony at City Hall. Audrey had won another academic prize, this time for being the top math student in the state under 12. The mayor's office was giving out awards, and for once, I'd taken the afternoon off work and borrowed a decent dress from a coworker. The hall was crowded and echoing, the air buzzing with proud parents and restless kids in too stiff clothes. Audrey stood straight in her little navy dress, her hair neatly braided, clutching the speech she'd insisted on writing herself just in case. When they called her name, Audrey Fraser, my heart nearly burst. She walked up to the stage with calm, steady steps, shook hands with the mayor's assistant, and accepted her certificate like she'd been doing it all her life. I only really noticed the assistant when he walked off stage and came down the aisle toward me afterward. "Miss Fraser?" he asked. He was a bit taller than me, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and the kind of smile that showed up first in the eyes before it reached the mouth. His suit wasn't expensive, but it was neat, and he wore it like he'd earned it, not like it had been handed to him. "Yes," I said, smoothing my borrowed dress automatically. "That's me." "I'm Timothy," he said, offering his hand. "I work with the mayor. I just wanted to say, you have an incredible daughter." For a second, I thought he was just doing his job. Polite words, nothing more. But his gaze stayed on my face, not wandering around the room like he was bored. "She's something else," I agreed, unable to hide my pride. "You must have worked very hard," he added. "These kids don't get here alone. There's always a mom or a dad or someone sacrificing a lot behind them." That caught me off guard. People usually only saw Audrey's talent, not the overtime, the sleepless nights, the stacks of forms. "Her granddad sends what he can," I said. "I do the rest." Timothy smiled, a little softer now. "Well, if nobody's told you today, you're doing an amazing job, Miss Fraser." He lingered a moment too long for it to be just professional. Our eyes met, and there was something there: warmth, curiosity, a flicker of interest he didn't bother to hide. The next week, I got an email from a foundation I'd never heard of. Some wealthy benefactor had decided to sponsor gifted students in the state. Audrey had been awarded a grant, tuition for advanced programs, travel costs for competitions, access to special summer schools. At the bottom of the email, I saw a familiar name. "We were referred to you by the office of the mayor," it read. "Special thanks to Timothy Clark for bringing Audrey's case to our attention." I stared at the screen, my heart thudding, then looked over at Audrey, who was sprawled on the floor doing 3 chess puzzles at once. For the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. Audrey's future was opening wider, and, unexpectedly, so was mine. The day we went to sign the paperwork for Audrey's grant, I was excited enough to forget to be nervous. The foundation's office was on the top floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place I used to pass on the bus and wonder what it looked like inside. The lobby smelled like coffee and money, polished floors, big plants, people in suits moving with purpose. Audrey walked beside me, clutching her folder of documents, eyes wide. "Mama, look," she whispered, pointing at the elevator. "It has more buttons than our building has floors." I smiled. "That's because they probably do more than just sleep here." We rode up in a small crowd. Perfume, cologne, the faint click of keyboards leaking from open doors. On the 6th floor, the elevator opened to a quiet hallway. At the end of it, a frosted glass door waited with a silver plaque. I stepped closer to read it. "Financial Development and Grants, Mr. Alex Krasowski." The world narrowed to that one name. My heart slammed so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a second, I thought it had to be a coincidence. Krasowski wasn't that rare, was it? My hand tightened around Audrey's shoulder. "Mama?" she said. "Are you okay? You look weird." "I'm fine," I lied, even as my knees felt like they might give out. "I just need a second." Of all the offices, of all the foundations, of all the men in suits in this city, it had to be him. I thought about turning around, walking back into the elevator, telling Audrey we'd sorted out on email. But this grant meant advanced programs, summer schools, things I could never pay for alone. I swallowed hard. "We're here for Audrey," I whispered to myself. "Not for him." The door opened before I could knock. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, talking to someone over his shoulder. He was older than the last time I saw him, sharper around the eyes, hair styled more carefully. Expensive watch, crisp tie, the confident posture of someone used to people listening. "Alex?" I dropped my gaze, turning my face slightly, hoping he'd just walk past us. Audrey shifted closer to me, her small hand slipping into mine. "Miss Fraser?" a woman behind him called. "For the grant meeting?" "Yes," I said quickly, still looking at the floor. Alex turned then, really looked at me. His eyes flicked over my hair, my clothes, lingering on Audrey. For a heartbeat there was nothing, no recognition. Just another mother, another kid. Then his brows drew together. "Tiff?" he said slowly. "Tiffany?" There it was. 11 years dissolved in a single word. I straightened my shoulders. There was nowhere left to hide. "Hello, Alex," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. His gaze darted between me and Audrey, the pieces clearly falling into place in his head. "Is she—" He hesitated, then tried again. "Is this your daughter?" "My daughter," I answered. "Just that. Not ours, not yours." He looked at Audrey with new intensity. "You have a very smart child," he said. "I've read her file. Impressive." Audrey smiled politely, still clueless, offering her small hand. "Nice to meet you, sir," she said, in perfect practiced English that sounded older than her years. He shook it, still staring. The rest of the meeting felt like walking through water. We talked about programs, schedules, expectations, papers were signed, numbers were discussed. I kept my sentences short, my eyes on the documents, not on the man across the table who had once promised to take responsibility and then driven away. When it was over, he said nothing more. No questions, no apologies, no, "Is she mine?" I took Audrey's hand and walked out of that glass building with the grant in my bag and my past sitting behind a polished desk. For the next 2 years, I didn't hear a single word from Alex Krasowski. When I married Timothy, it felt like stepping into a different kind of life. Not the one I dreamed of at 20, but one I could trust. The wedding was small. City Hall, a white dress I'd bought on sale, Audrey standing beside me in a pale blue one she'd helped pick herself. Timothy's hand didn't shake when he slid the ring onto my finger. He looked at me like I was the only person in the room, not like someone whose life had already been wasted, as my father liked to say. Afterward, when we went back to our apartment, Audrey hugged Timothy first. "Congratulations, Mr. Clark," she said with a shy smile. He bent a little to meet her eyes. "I think we're past Mr. Clark now, don't you?" he said. "Timothy is fine. Or you can just call me the guy who makes pancakes on Sundays." She laughed, and something in my chest loosened. Not long after, I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the edge of the bathtub again, just like I had all those years ago, staring at a test with 2 pink lines. This time there was no cold panic. No math about rent and prenatal vitamins alone. Just a stunned kind of joy. And a little fear. Timothy lifted me off my feet when I told him, spinning me around the tiny bathroom like we lived in a movie. "A boy or a girl, I don't care," he said into my neck. "But this kid is going to know exactly how wanted they were." Audrey finished school the same year I started wearing maternity jeans, 12 years old and already holding a high school diploma. She'd been moved ahead so many times that her classmates were all older teenagers. The state test scores were insane. The local press loved her. "Genius girl from a single-mom home heads to college at 12, the headlines said. They wrote about her brain, her talent, her future. They didn't write about how she still slept with her favorite stuffed bunny, or how she cried quietly when she thought nobody heard her after kids at school called her robot and freak. One night, when my belly was already round and heavy, I found her standing in the doorway of the nursery we were putting together. She traced a finger along the edge of the tiny crib, thoughtful. I walked up behind her. "You okay, Bree?" She didn't answer right away. Then she turned and wrapped her arms around me, careful, like she was afraid to squeeze the baby. "My brother is going to be so lucky," she murmured into my shoulder. "He'll have a father from the first day. I never had that." I swallowed hard, stroking her hair. "You had Granddad Bobby," I reminded her softly. "You have me, and you have Timothy now. He loves you." "I know," she said. "I'm grateful. It's not the same as having someone who was there from the beginning, you know?" I kissed the top of her head and said all the right comforting things. But inside, something twisted. The wound I'd learned to live with had never really closed. It just sat there quietly. Her words pressed on it. A week later, my phone rang early in the morning while I was making coffee. The screen lit up with an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear as I reached for the sugar. "Tiffany?" The voice was deeper, older, but I knew it in an instant. My hand froze. "Alex?" He cleared his throat. "Yeah, it's me. Could we meet?" "No," I said immediately. "There's nothing to talk about." "Please," he pushed. "Just once. I won't take much of your time. It's about Audrey." Her name in his mouth made my chest ache. "There's nothing about Audrey you need to be involved in," I snapped. I need to ask you something. I need to hear it from you." He sounded too calm, too controlled, like this was a business call. "Please, Tiff." I should have hung up. Instead, against every instinct, I agreed to meet him at a small cafe near my work. I told myself I wanted to see what angle he was playing before I slammed the door again. He was already there when I arrived, in another tailored suit, fingers around a black coffee. He stood when he saw me. "You look..." He paused. "Different. Good. Sit, please." I stayed standing. "Say what you need to say, Alex." He exhaled slowly. "Audrey is my daughter, right?" I felt my jaw tighten. "She's my daughter," I said. "Only mine." "I checked her birth date," he said, and for the first time there was a flicker of something like discomfort in his eyes. "She was born 5 months after you left the city." "Left the city?" I repeated, a bitter laugh catching in my throat. "You call it this way? You left me pregnant in that city, Alex. I left because I couldn't afford to stay and raise a baby alone." He flinched, just barely. "Just tell me," he insisted. "Why do you want to know?" I shot back. "And why did it take you 2 years after seeing her file to check her birth date? You didn't have time earlier?" "I was working," he said, quick, like he'd rehearsed it. "A lot. I know I wasn't right. I was young, I panicked. But I want to fix it now. I want to be her dad." "You're not her dad," I said quietly. "You left her before she was born." He leaned forward, hands open. "People change, Tiff. I've changed. I can give her things you can't. Connections, opportunities, a better future. I want to be there for her now." I felt the old anger rise like a wave. You want, I said. Where was all that wanting 12 years ago when I was feeding her at 3 a.m. and wondering how to pay rent? He kept talking, kept begging, painting pictures of schools, programs, a life with doors opened by his name. I listened until I couldn't anymore. Then I turned and walked out. All day his words bounced around my skull, but louder than that was Audrey's voice in the nursery. "My brother will be so lucky. I never had a father." That night, lying awake beside a sleeping Timothy and feeling the baby turn inside me, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a question I hated. Was I protecting Audrey by keeping him away, or just punishing him and letting her pay the price? When Alex called again a week later, I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. "Okay," I said, before he could start his speech. "You can meet her, but this happens on my terms. And if you hurt her, I swear to God, I will never forgive you. Not again." Telling Audrey about Alex was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We sat on the couch, just the two of us. Timothy had taken a late meeting, and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the distant sound of traffic. My belly was heavy. My back ached. Audrey sat cross-legged, a notebook open on her lap filled with equations and half-finished chess problems. "Bree," I began, already feeling my throat tighten. "There's something important I need to talk to you about." She glanced up immediately, sharp-eyed like she always was. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're both okay," I said quickly. "This is about your father." She went still. "My biological father?" she asked, in that very adult, precise way she had. She'd never called anyone dad. Not Bobby, not Timothy, just Granddad and Timothy. "Yes," I said. "Your biological father." She swallowed, eyes fixed on my face like she was solving a problem with too many variables. "I thought he didn't want me," she said, voice small. I exhaled slowly. "When I got pregnant, he walked away. I raised you with Granddad and then with Timothy. He didn't call, he didn't help. For a long time, I didn't even think he'd ever want to know you." "And now?" she asked. "Now he knows about you, and he wants to meet." The words tasted sour. I told him no at first, but then I thought maybe you should be the one to decide if you want to see him. Fear flickered in her eyes. For all her awards and perfect scores, she was still just a girl who'd spent her whole life wondering why she wasn't enough to keep a father. "I don't know," she whispered. "What if he doesn't like me?" I almost laughed. "He'd have to be a complete idiot not to like you, and if he is, we'll walk away. Together. I won't let anyone hurt you." She thought for a moment, chewing on her lip the way she did when she was deep in thought. "Okay," she said finally. "I want to meet him. Once." Alex suggested a cafe. Neutral ground, public, safe. When we walked in, he was already there, standing when he saw us. His eyes went straight to Audrey and he put on a smile so warm it almost looked real. "Hi," he said softly. "You must be Audrey." She nodded, hovering a step behind me. "Yes, sir." "Sir?" He chuckled. "Just Alex is fine." They talked about school, math, languages. He'd done his homework. He knew her achievements, her grants, her competitions. He told her she was remarkable. He told her he was proud. And I watched my daughter soak it up like sunrise after a very long night. Within a month, he was taking her every weekend. A car would pull up, a sleek black sedan with a driver in a dark suit. Audrey would rush around the apartment, grabbing her books, her chess set, chattering about the museum they were going to, the restaurant he wanted to show her, the people he wanted her to meet. "Mom, he speaks Polish with me now," she said once, eyes shining. "And he wants to introduce me to a professor who's researching gifted children. Isn't that amazing?" I smiled and nodded, the smile tight around the edges. Timothy squeezed my hand at the door, silently asking if I was okay. I wasn't sure of the answer. She talked about him constantly, his office, his friends, his car, his ideas. "Dad says," started to appear at the beginning of sentences. It stung every time, but I pretended it didn't. She deserved to taste this, even if I didn't trust him. The article hit a few weeks later. I was at the kitchen table, paying bills and rubbing my swollen ankles, when a pop-up notification appeared on my phone. Local news. "Candidate for governor finds lost daughter after 11 years apart." My stomach dropped. The photo at the top of the article was Alex in a suit, smiling for the camera, one hand on Audrey's shoulder. She was in the navy dress I'd ironed, her hair pulled back, her smile shy but bright. I clicked. The article told a story. His story. How a hard-working financial expert turned public servant had recently reconnected with the daughter he hadn't known about. How he was committed to being there for her now, to supporting her extraordinary mind. It said he was proof that good men can grow, change, and take responsibility. Then there was another linked piece. The genius daughter. Gifted mind of candidate's child stuns experts. They quoted some psychologist talking about how intelligence is strongly linked to the father's genetics. Her father's sharp analytical mind clearly passed down, it read. Her abilities are likely strengthened by paternal heritage. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. I dialed Alex's number with shaking hands. Audrey answered. "Mom?" she chirped. "Hi. Dad is busy right now. He's in a meeting. Did you see the article? My photo is on the main page. Isn't that cool?" I swallowed the anger, the hurt, the urge to scream. "That's great, honey," I managed. "You look very beautiful. Could you ask your dad to call me when he's free?" "Sure, I'll tell him," she said, distracted. "We have a charity event next weekend. I'm going with him. We're raising money for education programs. Okay, I gotta go. Love you." "Love you too," I whispered. But the line had already gone dead. Alex never called. All week long, my messages went unanswered. I watched interviews where he smiled and talked about family values and investing in our children, my daughter's face occasionally appearing on a screen behind him. Genius, but still a child, I kept thinking, watching her stand there next to him. She didn't see the cameras as weapons. She saw them as lights. By Friday, I'd had enough. I was 8 months pregnant, exhausted and furious. Timothy offered to come with me, but I shook my head. "This is my mess," I said. "I need to say this myself." I went to Alex's office, the same glass building where we'd signed the grant papers years before. The same lobby that smelled like coffee and ambition. The elevator ride felt longer this time. My back ached, my feet throbbed, but anger kept me upright. His assistant tried to tell me he was busy. I didn't care. "Tell him Tiffany Frazier is here about his daughter," I said, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. "And that if he doesn't see me now, he won't see her again." That got me in. Alex was behind his desk when I walked in, sleeves rolled up, jacket off. He looked tired in that polished way powerful men do, like he wanted you to know he was working hard. "Tiff," he said, standing. "You look—" "Don't," I cut in. "We're not doing small talk." He glanced at my belly, then back at my face. "Sit down at least. You shouldn't be on your feet." I stayed standing. "You won't use Audrey for your political games," I said. "This stops now." His jaw tightened. "I'm not using her. I'm giving her opportunities. She's on TV, she's meeting important people, she's getting visibility that will follow her for life. Do you know what doors this can open?" "She's not a key for your doors," I shot back. "She's a child, my child, and you don't get to roll in here after 12 years and suddenly decide she's your favorite campaign prop." He raised his hands, a practiced gesture of reason. "You're emotional, I get that. But I'm building a better future, for this state, for kids like her. And she loves being with me. You've heard her. She's happy." "Yes, she is," I said quietly. "Because she doesn't know better yet." For a moment, our eyes locked, his full of calculation, mine full of something heavier. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "No more articles about her coming from your genius. No more staged interviews with her by your side. No more using her name in campaign speeches. If I see her face next to yours on a screen again, you will never see her in person. Not for a campaign, not for a birthday, not for anything." He stared at me, the charming smile gone. "You're overreacting," he said finally. "But, fine, if that's what it takes to keep you calm. I promise I won't use her for politics." I didn't believe him, but I needed to hear the words. A month later, I went into labor. It was a week before Election Day. Alex had offered, so graciously, to take Audrey for a few days, to give us space. She'd hugged me goodbye, eyes bright with excitement about helping Dad with last campaign events. "I'll be fine, Mom," she said. "Focus on the baby. I'll bring him a present when I come back." The delivery was rough, but when they placed my son in my arms, everything else fell away for a moment. Timothy cried openly, kissing my forehead, telling me how strong I was. For a while, the world was just the three of us in that small hospital room. It wasn't until the next day, when a nurse turned on the TV in the corner to have some background noise, that I saw it. Alex on stage, grinning, in front of a sea of signs with his name, and beside him, holding his hand, looking slightly overwhelmed but trying to be brave, was Audrey. They were calling her the governor-to-be's brilliant daughter. They were interviewing her, asking how proud she was of her father. He gave a speech about fighting for every child's future, for my daughters and for yours. The room went blurry around the edges. My son whimpered in my arms. Timothy reached for the remote, but I stopped him. "No," I said hoarsely. "Leave it." Reporters gushed. Commentators talked about the perfect family image, about brains and leadership in one bloodline. They loved the story. Self-made man, genius daughter, young promising leader. They didn't see the girl who had once pressed her face into my shoulder and whispered, "I never had a father." They just saw a headline. My blood boiled, but under the rage was something colder and heavier, the realization that for Alex, this wasn't about making up for lost time. It had never been about Audrey's heart. It was about his career, and he'd just proved on live television exactly how far he was willing to go. Leaving the hospital with my son in my arms and Timothy carrying the bag, all I wanted was quiet. Instead, I found a black car waiting at the curb. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast. "Miss Fraser?" he asked. Every cell in my body tensed. "Yes." "I'm with Governor-elect Krasowski's security detail," he said smoothly, like he was announcing the weather. "We're here to pick up Audrey. The governor would like her to join him for his victory speech this evening." Timothy shifted closer to me. The baby stirred. "She's not going anywhere," I said. Audrey, who'd run ahead to hold the car door like a little adult, froze. "What? Mom, of course I'm going. He needs me there. We always planned—" "No," I repeated. "You're coming home with us." Her eyes widened, hurt flooding her face. "Why? You saw him on TV, right? This is important. For him, for me. I'm part of this." The security man cleared his throat. "Ma'am, it's completely safe. We'll bring her back after—" I cut him off with a look. I said no. You can tell the governor that if he wants to speak to his daughter, he can call me himself like any normal father. He pressed his lips together, then nodded and stepped back. The car door shut with a soft, expensive click. They drove off. Audrey stared at me as if I'd just yanked a ladder away while she was still climbing. "Why did you do that?" she demanded when we got upstairs. Timothy quietly carried the baby into the nursery and closed the door, giving us space. "I'm not letting him drag you in front of cameras every time he wants applause," I said, trying to stay calm. "You are not a trophy, Audrey." Her chin lifted, a stubbornness in her I recognized all too well. "Dad is doing his best for me," she shot back. "He's giving me opportunities. He's proud of me. Why don't you understand that?" The word dad hit like a slap. "I understand more than you think," I said quietly. "I understand that when the show is over, he goes home, and you're the one who's left with whatever he broke." "You just hate him," she snapped, "because he left you. This isn't about me, it's about you." It was our first real fight. Not about homework, not about bedtime, about loyalty, about trust, about which parent was ruining her life. That night, she went to bed without hugging me. The silence in her room felt heavier than any slammed door. For a little while after the election, Alex tried to keep up the act. He called. He invited her to a few public events, not as often as during the campaign, but enough to keep the story alive. The governor and his brilliant daughter. The perfect caption. Then the calls got shorter, less frequent. "I'm busy, sweetheart," I heard him say on speaker one evening when she'd begged to visit. "We'll make time soon, okay? I promise." Soon stretched into weeks. On her 13th birthday, she sat with her phone in her hand all day, pretending not to watch the screen. We had cake, balloons, Timothy made his famous pancakes. My dad called to yell singing "Happy Birthday" off-key. But there was no call from the governor's mansion. No text, no message, nothing. "He's probably just busy," Audrey said once, then never mentioned it again. She didn't cry where I could see her, but the light in her eyes dimmed. She became quieter, more serious. The girl who used to chatter about theorems and trombone practice now spent long hours alone in her room, headphones on, solving endless problem sets like they were the only thing that made sense. I lay awake that night, my son asleep in the crib beside our bed, Timothy breathing steadily next to me, and I felt the full weight of my mistake settle on my chest. I had opened the door to a man I knew was selfish, and I'd let him walk straight into my daughter's heart. He had never once congratulated her on her birthday since the day she was born, and now that she finally knew him, he was breaking her all over again. A year later, Audrey stood on another stage. This time it wasn't a city hall podium or a campaign rally, it was the auditorium of her college. 13 years old, smallest person in the room, and they were calling her the youngest, best student our college has ever had. She wore a simple black dress and the same serious expression she had when solving equations, but I could see the difference in her eyes. There was a distance now, a carefulness she hadn't had before. When they called her name, she walked to the microphone and accepted her certificate, shook hands with the dean, answered a few polite questions. Cameras flashed, local news crews hovered, but this spotlight was finally about her, not somebody's campaign. After the ceremony, while students and parents milled around, a familiar security detail cut through the crowd like a dark tide. Alex appeared between them, still in a suit, still in control of every step he took. A few people turned, whispering, "The governor." Of course he'd come. Big story, big cameras, his brilliant daughter in the middle of it. "Congratulations," he said, stopping in front of us. "Audrey, you were incredible." She straightened, but she didn't rush to hug him this time. "Thank you, sir." He glanced at the reporters lingering nearby, then back at her. "Listen, they're still here, and my team thinks it would be great if we did a short interview together. You and me. Talk about education, talent, family. We could—" She cut him off, voice calm and clear. "Did you forget I'm smart?" she asked. He blinked. "What?" "I learned from the first time," she said, every word sharp and steady. "Mr. Krasowski." The Mr. landed harder than any shouted insult could have. For a moment, something cracked in his polished expression. Annoyance, maybe, or the realization that this wasn't going to be fixed with charm and cameras. "Audrey," he started, flicking a glance at the journalists. "You're being emotional. I've been very busy as governor, but—" She shook her head. "Busy people still remember birthdays," she said quietly. "Busy people still call back? You wanted a story, not a daughter. I'm not doing interviews with you." Silence wrapped around us, heavier than any applause. He looked at me then, like I might step in, smooth it over, play the old role of the girl who swallowed everything. I just met his eyes and said nothing. He adjusted his tie, anger sliding neatly back behind professionalism. "If you change your mind," he said to her, "you know how to reach me." "No," she replied. "I don't, and I'm okay with that." He walked away, security at his heels, reporters sensing something had gone wrong and drifting off toward safer stories. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Across the hall, Timothy was waiting with our son, now a chubby-legged toddler clutching a crushed program in one fist. He waved when he saw us, smile wide, pride written all over his face. Audrey slipped her hand into mine for a second, just long enough to squeeze. "Can we go home now?" she asked, then raised her voice a little. "Dad?" Timothy looked up, confused for half a heartbeat. Then his eyes went shiny. "Yeah, kiddo," he said, clearing his throat. "Let's go home." We walked out of that building together. My daughter, who could play with numbers like music but still carried scars no test could measure. My son, babbling nonsense, the man who chose to stay, and me, who had messed up, fallen down, and kept going anyway. People like to say genius is inherited, that it runs in bloodlines and last names. But watching Audrey that day, I knew the truth. You can be a genius and still be a hurt kid. And sometimes the smartest thing you ever do is decide who gets to call themselves your family.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, Subscribe and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.